I'm sneaking in before the video actually starts to just say that I'm totally aware that I look like a completely different person in these videos. I recorded the intro and outro of each of these videos back in lockdown 2, 3, I don't know, it's a blur, but yeah, I don't want to re-record them because I would say the same things about the songs that I did back then now. And also we are in a 30-degree heat wave at the moment, and also the thought of me closing these windows and putting these big lights on, I just know I will boil and I don't want that. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Okay, bye. Really not sure what is happening with my hair today, but never mind. My name is Mels, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking all about checks notes, the overture and finale, so Diamonds and Ascent. These two are my favourite parts of the EP, 100%, particularly Ascent. I think that it is brown cow stunning. Yeah, I literally love it so much. I love it more than Diamonds, I think, because I think the production is better. I think that the sounds that I used are better. But originally I wasn't even gonna have a finale. I knew I wanted an intro track because I really like when EPs and albums have them, particularly because I wanted to create a world. When people listen to this, I want them to be transported. I think that having kind of story pieces like an intro, maybe some interludes and an outro, I think that's the perfect way to do it. The overture is called Diamonds because I originally was going to have a spoken word piece performed by me as the introduction, and the poem that I wrote, which I thought I was going to read for this track, ends with the line, "No pressure, no diamonds." However, I reflected on that sentiment and I thought, I don't agree with that. Sure, people might perform under pressure, but ultimately diamonds are formed during rest and maybe just after rest. And that is a concept that I've really had to come to terms with, particularly during the pandemic, when I felt like I would go through phases of totally driven by myself, working really hard, and then thinking, OMG, I am overwhelmed, I need to not do this for a while. And particularly at the start of the pandemic, when everyone was like, we need to use this time, we need to like start a business, like do this, do that, I don't know, find a new hobby, like whatever. I mean, don't get me wrong, classic me, I did all of that anyway. I needed to learn that actually, even if I hadn't have done all those things, that is totally acceptable, and plenty of people didn't, and that is also completely fine. There is nothing wrong with resting and not busying yourself constantly. How I was working towards this EP was all about authenticity and making sure that it was in alignment with who I am and what my values are. What is my background and what is my personal spin that I can put on pop music? I'm classically trained, so I wanted to explore composition again and explore classical arrangement. Bring back memories for anyone? Oh my gosh! I'm actually really excited about this. I am just, obviously I've got a free trial, I have not just bought it or anything. Oh, this is so nostalgic. I am so excited. I hope I can remember how to use it. I'm really hoping this free trial will allow me to export to MIDI, because that is all I need. If I could just write it on a score, that would be like so much easier for me to do. I hope so anyway. I haven't needed to do this since I was 17, so yeah, definitely need to export as MIDI and then have these MIDI played by Labs and BBC Symphony Orchestra. I'm actually so happy with this, you have no idea. This is like, wow, okay, yeah, I'm in 4/4 and I'm in C minor, oh my gosh. Amazing how things just come back to you. I would love to know if anybody else used this at school. Hello, I am working in a different space because I find sitting behind this like balcony door so much more inspiring. It's definitely not as comfortable as my study, but this is a lot. Yeah, sometimes I just need to get out of there basically because it's just too much of the same room. But anyway, I've had far too much coffee today as I've been making use of the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. So I've been basically doing a little cafe tour this afternoon. And yeah, it's now 7:10 and I've honestly not really been able to focus this afternoon since I arrived home, which was like a couple of hours ago. So I've done a lot of other things today, but not too much in terms of, actually stuff towards the EP. So basically at the minute I'm trying to bounce all these stems in the Logic project as MIDI so that I can then put it back into Sibelius and then plot out the actual notation and scoring from there, and then put it back into Logic to get the sounds from my VSTs. But I can't seem to... All tracks as MIDI file. Yeah, that's what I want. MIDI, okay. But that's the whole thing. Because I clearly don't want to do that. Yeah, it seems complex, to be honest. And not very straightforward, but that's what I'm trying to do. Sibelius is not as straightforward as I recall it being when I was at school. But that was, the last time I used Sibelius, like I said. The last time I used Sibelius, like I said yesterday, was approximately 9 years ago. Gosh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's going to be a bit of a long evening, but it's going to be so worth it. It's gotten significantly darker since my last clip of me trying to work this out, which probably means that I've been sat here for too long doing other things, or it's taken me longer than I expected. To be really honest with you, I've had far too much caffeine today and I've spent the afternoon not really doing much apart from just being really clumsy and trying to do things and failing. So I need to, I had way more caffeine than I thought I actually would have. So it's been quite a shock to the system, but I've got Sibelius working how I remember it working at school, and I'm really happy with it. So, can I do this? Can I turn you around? No, fine. So we've got my score here, and my keyboard. Ooh, lovely close up of my face, and my little, slipper socks, because I'm wearing a crop top and shorts, but I'm still cold, so the feet. Anyway, yes, blank score. I'm really happy that I can do it this way. I feel like this is going to make it much more authentic and realistic. So, yeah, let's give it a go. So yesterday I did a lot of work on the Overture, and I found myself getting really stressed about it because I just felt like it was... I kind of find myself getting caught up in the idea that this is a stupid idea. It's so over the top. Nobody asked for this. Yada, yada, yada. However, it is what I want it. It is how I want it. But, yeah. I did find myself getting really stressed, so I took myself for a time out in the bath. And I remembered to have fun with it, which sounds really simple. But I think this whole process of creating this body of work is actually designed to show me how important it is to have faith in the journey and have patience with myself, and not get too annoyed about it coming out on a specific date, because, right, this is going to sound completely ridiculous and I'm aware of that, but it's so nice as an artist, I think, to get the Spotify stats at the end of the year, right? They do this thing where you can like, you get basically a little graphic emailed to you and it says how many hours or whatever that your music was listened to around the world, how many countries you were listened to in, how many fans you have. It basically puts it all in this really cute little graphic so you can readily post it on social media and of course share Spotify with all your fans. And it's really nice because the first year, so 2018, my first song came out and my stats were pretty low because I only had one song out, and yeah, that's fine. 2019, I did a lot. I say a lot more. I made a couple more songs, released a couple more songs. So my stats grew considerably. So it was really nice to be able to compare these two graphics and be like, oh my gosh, I've grown. Like, look at what I've done. That's great. And there's a big bit of me that just wants this to come out like now so that I can make it into other people's top lists, and also so that I can have that graphic emailed to me at the end of the year that says, oh, look how much more amazing you are than you were last year, or whatever it might be. And it's so frustrating that even comes into my head, but it's just Spotify pandering to people's egos ahead of actually paying them a fair wage. It's really unfortunate that there is not really much other option, and I feel like the discoverability for artists on streaming platforms, artists of my size, is really important. But my gosh, it annoyed me that even came into my mind and tainted this amazing body of work with my performance on one streaming platform. Like, that really annoyed me. So I basically needed a timeout and to kind of sit in the bath and think about how actually what's so much more important is that I enjoy creating this, because if I enjoy it, people are going to hear that. If I think it's crap, people are going to hear that as well. I'm having a day where I'm getting a little bit in my head, and also I'm having I'm this sort of person that just kind of gets on with things and all of this sort of stuff, but there are some days where I just literally cannot do that. I just can't. I do not have the capacity to create and give energy to things when there is just so much large scale trauma happening all around. And it's not even people that I don't know anymore. At some point it was, when, let's just, in terms of coronavirus, when it was in China, not quite in Britain yet, it was like, oh, that's coming for sure. This world is small now. We're all traveling all over the place. That's definitely coming over here at some point, and who knows what that's going to look like. But nobody I know has been affected by it yet, so it kind of hit very differently when actually people who I know have been affected by it, but also the amount of trauma that people have had to deal with on top of that is not even a direct result of coronavirus. This year has just brought so much collective grief, I think, for so many different things, whether that is a physical person, or it is a job, or what I've gone through, or whether it's the things that come with a job, in a capitalist society, what gives us value and purpose is our income. Whatever, it's the way it is. So grieving the loss of that kind of purpose is weird. There's so many things. It's my toilet just making some noise as well, but it's like, yes, I agree. Grieving, just grieving the closeness that we once took for granted, And I think, I've lost my train of thought. This is why I could never go into politics or anything, because I'd be like, yeah, I think this, and this, and I think this because of X, Y, and Z, and then I'll just keep blethering on, and then I'll just look out the window and be like, oh yeah, but look Look at that bird over there. The weird thing is about it though as well is that we can't collectively grieve together, you know. It's not like traditionally if you, you know, pre-COVID went to a funeral and people would just be standing together having the same emotion with the same one heart, you know. It's not like that because Zoom doesn't cut it, FaceTime doesn't cut it. And I said this before, like I feel really grateful in a way that I don't have a job because, you know, and that's a really weird thing to be grateful about. I get it. But a real positive for me is that I can kind of emotionally process things that are happening because I don't have to read something first thing in the morning and then go and do my job for the day, come home, then try and process what's going on. You know, I don't have to do that. And actually, I think that that's a really beneficial thing. Obviously, finances aside. Gosh, this EP is absolutely been my saving grace, this body of work. It absolutely has been. But equally, there are days where I just think it's a drop in the ocean of like things that anyone, a human being can do right now. It just doesn't really matter on the large scale, but man, it matters so much to me. Because without it, I would have gone, I don't know, I would have been distraught. And much more distraught than I actually was. I mean, when I lost my job, I cried every day for like 2 weeks, which is rare for me. I've never done that before, not even after a breakup. Sorry, all my ex-boyfriends. I didn't even cry that much then, you know, but my job, you know, I had financial goals this year. So, yeah. Anyway, this video is already 7 minutes long, so I'm gonna stop waffling and get some chocolate into me, and then the endorphins in my brain will travel through my bloodstream and just basically hug my womb. I think that's how it works. Yeah. PSA, French horns make literally everything better. I was really concerned about the transition from E flat major to C minor, which is a really simple modulation, but I haven't written this style of music since I was at school, which is a long time ago. So I was really concerned about how that would work, but you just stick a French horn in there and it just sounds... I actually always wanted to play the French horn when I was at school. There was basically a girl at my school who played the French horn and she was like excellent, she was really good, but I just remember her standing up at assembly and playing it for the school and just watching all the spit drop out of the bell, or is it called a bell in a French horn? I'm not sure, but all the spit drop out the bottom and just sitting on the floor, and I was horrified, so I obviously didn't do it. That is so much cooler. Obviously, I say cooler in loose terms here. I am 98% finished the Overture. There's basically 4 bars at the end, which don't really work that well. But apart from that, now it all flows in together, all flows into the next section really well, I think. It is 9 p.m. I could really do with not doing this now, but I don't really know what else to do with myself. My go-to is have a bath, but I can't tell you how many baths I've had this week. I've just had so many. Like one a day almost, and I'll have just a quick one, you know, I'll have a long one, and I'm like... Oh.
Hey, so this is going to be slightly confusing because my desk setup has changed quite a lot since I last did some of these videos. So my webcam is actually down here and my monitor is up here. So you're going to get a really flattering angle of my chin. You're welcome. Anyway, this is actually probably the messiest project of the whole EP. No apologies though, because to be frank, this was the last thing that I wrote before completion. I knew that I wanted to have, as I previously mentioned in this video, this spoken word track, and then that didn't really feel particularly authentic to me, so I was like, actually no, let's go down the classical route to have an overture. And then right at the very, very last minute did I think, actually, hang on a minute, I could have a finale as well.
I found that I'd written a note to myself on my phone for some reason with the words, maybe add an outro.
Why not? And when it comes to anything I do, music, literally anything, if I do something and I can still think of things to do to that thing, I'll make sure I do them, because I really didn't want to release this EP and then listen back to it and think, oh, I really wish that I had, added that or whatever it might be. But anyway, you'll see that I've got the overture here and then the finale here. Now, I kept them in the same project because they're about 1.5 minutes each. They're not particularly long, and also they had the same instrumentation pretty much, so it didn't really make sense to separate them, and also they're in the same BPM. So as you can see, I started to use some markers here in our markers bar, but to be honest, they're so messy. For goodness sake. You can see that the block of MIDI starts on bar 28, and I've got it starting on bar 30 just because it's such a... Yeah, so it's just irrelevant really. But initially when I was first starting out, I wanted to take my chosen motifs from each track and put them in an order that made sense to me, and an order that showed growth throughout and dynamic range throughout the piece. So we start off in E flat, and the key signature in terms of what it is written into the Logic project remains the same. However, the tonality actually changes to G minor and then G major before going to C minor, where I've actually changed it in a project. And then it stays in C minor, goes to the relative major, E flat, back for Love Me Like You're Gonna Lose Me, which of course actually starts there. But for the actual project, just to keep it simple, when it came to using these Apple MIDI loops, which I'll talk about later, for the finale, it's important to kind of keep the project in the actual key that you're going to use. So that's why it remained in C minor, because I knew that I wanted my finale to sound minor. So it's minor. Anyway, what we have in terms of the instrumentation here, we can ignore that, and that for the time being, because I'll talk about that when I talk about the finale later, of course. But these down here are little excerpts, basically, of each track. For example, A and D. It's actually a very early version where I had those boom sounds on the first beat of the bar. I took them out because I didn't really think that it made for a good enough dynamic range when the kick finally came in A and D. So yeah, earlier version, but I put in an excerpt of the beginning of A and D because I knew that, of course, the overture is going to go into that, so it was really good for me to kind of hear it in context in a way without having the full version of A and D in the project taking up CPU that doesn't need to be taken up. So that was my plan with that. Same with Heavy Crown. I knew that was going to close the EP, so I've got... Interestingly enough, I think that's an earlier version as well, which ends with a little run. That was actually taken out in the final version, but same thing. Wanted to hear it in context and how the finale flowed from the final track, Heavy Crown. But in terms of the overture, so we've got this little victory folder. Now these are actually Apple MIDI loops. I hope you can call them loops, but they are Apple MIDI, so they're just found in this folder. That's what I was looking at last. Orchestral symbols, did not find them in here. But yes, you can now choose software instrument loops. There you go. That's a better wording for it. But they are so helpful, and they're in all sorts of genres, not just classical as well. But they are particularly helpful when it comes to writing MIDI for instruments which have a range of intonation. So for example, when you're playing a violin, you can do so many different playing styles, glissandos, tremolos, all sorts of things, which you could program into the MIDI manually, but it would take a while, and if there's a shortcut, you're going to take the shortcut, right? And the great thing about these is you can see these lines here. Now they show what's happening in the intonation MIDI wise. Of course, you also have access to them as MIDI files, so you can just take the note and move it around. So that's really, really helpful. So for example, you can see in the violas, I must have added those in as well. Not sure why I didn't, keep that as a pedal along with the lower note, but there we are. I must have made that choice for a reason. And the word victory, by the way, is just, although I feel it is incredibly fitting with the whole theme of the EP, that's just what the Software Loop family was called, so I've kept it the same. Now these tracks actually automatically load in the Logic stock strings VST, which I'm going to be honest with you, it would not be my go-to. I don't think it really sticks out from my strings that I've written, which have been made with the BBC Symphony Orchestra VST by Spitfire, which is free. I think it's free if you do a online survey, or at least that was the case when I got this a few months ago. But I highly recommend it. It's a wonderful VST, and it just sounds pretty realistic in my opinion for something that's free, and classical instruments are notoriously difficult to get right, because I'm sure that maybe you've tried to program brass, for example. Some Logic stock or any stock brass VSTs can sound shockingly cringe, but yeah, that one's really, really good. So yes, highly recommend that. So going through the folders then, we have those victory ones that I've already mentioned. We've got my strings. You can see there's a lot going on in here. However, when you break it down, it's actually not that much, because ultimately we have violin 1, violin 2, we have violas, we have cellos, and we have double bass. However, I have created new tracks for every time that I want to include a new playing style. So the great thing about this BBC Symphony Orchestra VST is you've got long notes, you've got spiccato, you've got pizzicato, and you've got tremolo, if appropriate for string instruments. So that's why it looks hella busy, but actually when you break it down, there is not too much going on. And then we have the woodwind. So this is actually very much the same. So oboe staccato, for example, bassoon staccato, yeah. So we've got piccolo, flutes, clarinet, oboe and bassoon. And then we have the brass section here. So we've got our horns, trumpets, tuba, tenor trombone, trombone and bass trombone. And upper percussion. So we've got timpanis, they're just one-off hits. We've got timpani rolls, snare, glockenspiel, cymbals, like a suspended cymbal, harp, celeste, twinkles. I think that is just like a wind chime, castanets, shaky thing. What the hell is shaky thing? I can't remember. Oh yeah, I'm still not sure what that is. So if you know what it is, you can tell me in the comments. Cymbal hits, snare roll, kick, lots of cymbals, yeah, so many cymbals. Tambourine, gong, crash, splash, gong, gong. Piano, which actually is classed as a percussion instrument if you don't know, but we don't use the piano until the finale, so I can ignore that for now. And that is all for the overture. So one of my favourite percussion instruments is the harp. So I wanted to start this piece with the harp. Now, as you can see, this is called Victory as well. So this is actually just a software instrument loop that I took from the Apple library. But I have kept it down here rather than in my Victory folder because I did replace the sound. I replaced it with a this BBC Symphony Orchestra VST. I preferred the harp sound in that. That's all it was. It automatically opened a Logic stock harp sound, which I thought was a bit naff. So yeah, I took that out. You'll see this one is called Airways. That's actually the name of the preset on the VST that was used in Pity Sex to create that sound, or that motif that's in that song. I literally just dragged and dropped the MIDI from that into this one. The way that Harry arranged that part was just perfect. I didn't really need to change it, so why not drag and drop? One of the really interesting things for me to kind of get my head around was creating dynamic range in MIDI, but without really getting bogged down by changing the velocities too much. So of course I have done that to an extent. That was really important. But I much more heavily relied on mixing rather than the velocities in the MIDI. So do I think that's the right way to go about it? I'm genuinely not sure. I don't think it's technically the best way to do it, but it made sense to me. And because, I mean, there's 112 tracks in this project. That's not loads, and they were all quite short and, whatever. So in terms of my CPU, it's fine. I just duplicated a lot of them and used the faders you can see here in the mixer, I've used the faders a lot to get my dynamic range. The next section in this overture is perhaps my favourite. I think that it was really fun to reimagine each of my favourite melodies from these songs and put them in a completely different order to what they appear like on the EP, because I think it kind of tells a different musical story, which is really fun actually. But I love this section so much. I think it A&D going into Skin, where it's really tight and small. So it's really it's pizzicato, it's almost like it's the melody's tiptoeing along, and then we have this expansive na 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 into this section which goes from being in C minor to E flat major, so we've kind of gone back to that relative major, and it's really expansive. Now, of course, when it came to actually putting the EP together once everything was finished, I would just wish my fringe would just knot today, like, so rude. Anyway, play ball, for goodness sake. Right, yes, so what I did was I automated a reverb tail for the end to make sure that it flowed over to A&D to kind of give it that, that Chromatica 2 into 911? That sort of feel, where it's this really expansive classical piece, and then it comes in, and then we're into the first track. Again, it sets the story, doesn't it? It sets the start. So all I didn't actually do it in this project. I did it in a separate one, but all I did was I created a new track, an auxiliary track, and then on that I put a reverb. I think it was just a Space Designer, perhaps. That's what I most commonly use. And then I automated the wetness of the reverb to grow with time. Simple. And also just on the last few bars. So that is the overture. I want to say that this isn't as complicated as it looks, which I think is true, because the hardest part was writing it. It wasn't mixing or arranging, although mixing had its own challenges, because how do you mix an orchestra when it's not in front of you, it's just in the box. On one screen I would have a picture of an orchestra, and on the other I'd have my project. So this is very similar to the picture that I had up as I was doing it. So if you're standing here and that's where you're listening from, you're going to have the violas in the centre, flutes just off to the left, oboes off to the right, for example. Your violins, first ones are going to be straight off to your left, and your cellos are going to be off to the right. And in terms of the getting this sort of backwards and forwards, you would just simply have your cellos slightly louder to bring them forward in the mix. So things like that. And things like percussion. So when I was in an orchestra, I was a percussion player. So because they are so, how do I put this? They cut through. So for me, making sure that the percussion was quieter wasn't quite as important. And you can see this reflected in my mixer as well. So here we have the strings, and they are right out to the left. Violas there, cellos there, they're directly to the right. And our bass, so slightly quieter and off a little bit to the right as well. So that's how I did it. And although I didn't research that idea, I just thought that seems logical to me. That still seems logical to me. I don't think I would change how I did it at all. So now we come to the finale. This is my favourite track on the whole EP. I adore it. It has so much meaning to me. There is significantly less going on, and that is because I, again, use these wonderful software instrument loops. So last summer, that's simply what they're called and how they're categorised within the library. So that is simply me copying and pasting the same violin part into some of these woodwind instruments and just taking away some of the MIDI. So you can see here we have the flutes, and they are just playing one note of the pattern. Like so. And then the same part is being played in here as well. So you can see the same MIDI pattern here. Like so. I just loved that progression so much. I thought it was beautiful. I don't remember changing it too much in terms of the notation. I think I might have, because I wanted it to kind of resolve. This is my favourite, what is it, 16, 18 bars? What is it, 12 bars? 9 bars? However many bars. Yeah. Damn, it's just so emotional for me. I just absolutely love it. It just... yeah, I just adore it. I think it's actually it's actually 8 bars long, this next section that's my favourite thing. My favourite thing on the whole EP is these 8 bars or so, or whatever it is. So what happens is we continue the same pattern in the strings, and then we introduce this melody into the oboe. While that's happening, we have it in the horns as well. Oh, I love a French horn. So I wanted a melody to kind of step it up a little bit. Then, you know what, I said it's favourite 8 bars. No, it's a favourite 4 bars. This is my favourite, is it like 5 bars? I don't know, whatever it is. This is my favourite section, actually. I just adore it. This is when the choir comes in. We have the horn playing the Pity Sex melody, which of course echoes my growth when it comes to sexuality, understanding my femininity and being a human. So that's very poignant to me, which is why I wanted to, show that, I guess, and remind myself that no matter how, traumatic experiences might affect you, music is still the escape, which of course, as I mentioned earlier, is why Escape is the last thing to be heard on the EP. And even more poignant because it is played on a child's music box, which again has a lot of deep meaning for me. Now, in terms of the horn's range, that is quite high. I personally liked it up there because I think it sounds quite urgent and forced, and quite anxious, I think, which again is a really interesting way to get dynamic range into your orchestral programming, because if you think about your instrument's range, like your voice, right? If you think about it like that, you have your mode or your chest voice or whatever where you speak from as well. So that range is so comfortable to you. And then you also have when you're singing really high and, you know, you're trying and and it, you know, it sounds a little bit forced. I'm not suggesting that's a healthy way to sing at all, because it's not. But instruments kind of have the same thing as well, right? They have the upper end of their pitch where you can go up there, but it adds a certain it has a certain type of emotion and feeling. So this choir is actually done on, I believe it's Labs. It wasn't. It's actually Logic Stock Sampler. Amazing. Wait, I did this on Labs. Yes, I knew I'd use Labs somewhere. So Labs is a free, again, Spitfire Audio VST. Highly recommend. You can just download the instruments that you want. So that's choir. It's called Choir Long, I guess because they are just singing long notes, but the choir sounds like this. And there's something so cinematic about having a choir just for a section, and that's what I wanted to achieve with this as a whole piece. So here's my favourite part of my whole EP. This is Native Instruments Una Corda. This is not free, but it wasn't that expensive either. It's about 120 quid, which for a VST that sounds this amazing is great. This one was actually brought to my attention by Andrea Consoli when I worked on Nothing Comes Close. He played me something that he'd written, and I was like, how did you record the piano like that? Sounds amazing. And he was like, I didn't record that. Like, that's a VST. I was like, what? Mind is blown. This VST is absolutely incredible. It is so detailed, down to being able to hear what the pianist is doing. So in terms of them shuffling around on their seat, the seat creaking, their fingertips on the keys, it is so incredibly detailed. It's just wonderful. So it's absolutely my go-to. I coupled that, of course, with this string arrangement up here. This was not a software instrument loop. This is just what I'd written. Those MIDI marks are just my sustain pedal on my piano. Another Labs VST. Labs Resonator Music Box, again free but sounds fantastic. The Overture is very much I want to put myself into this project in terms of my tastes, my authenticity. This is me, and the finale is, damn, what a journey this has been. Not just putting this EP together, but like my whole life. I feel like sometimes when in piece of music is so personal, I feel like only I will understand what it means to me. But upon discussing your favourite tracks of mine with some of you, some people have actually said that the Overture is a favourite because it is the only one that repeats that kind of pity sex motif from before. I don't know if anyone's actually noticed that's the melody for Escape that closes the whole thing. So if you noticed, do let me know. I'd love to know. But yes, that is the project.
I really hope that answered any questions that you've had about the orchestrations on my EP. If you have any more questions about this sort of thing, then please do let me know. I think it's a really interesting topic because not a lot of producers who make pop music also do this as well. If you have enjoyed this video though, please do make sure you like and subscribe. That stuff really helps me. Comment if you've enjoyed it, and also hit that bell to notify you whenever I post a new video. Thank you so much for joining me in this one, and I'll see you in my next.